Thursday was an historic day in the sports world as actions were taken due to the coronavirus outbreak, cancellations and postponements from across the sports landscape with the NHL, MLS, NCAA, NBA, others taking drastic measures to prevent the spread of the virus. As we say hello and welcome to SportsCenter with Jay and Dan. Kayla's here with us. We sat on this desk Wednesday and we saw the snowball effect start to happen when the NBA said, okay, we're going to put things on pause. The NHL released a statement on Wednesday and said, we're going to tell you what we're going to do Thursday, and that did occur Thursday.
Absolutely. They wanted to talk things through in the NHL, saying, look, we are going to also take a pause on our season, releasing this statement. The NHL has been attempting to follow the mandates of health experts and local authorities while preparing for any possible developments without taking premature or unnecessary measures. However, following last night's news that an NBA player has tested positive for coronavirus, and given that our league shares so many facilities and locker rooms, and it now seems likely that some member of the NHL community would test positive at some point, it is no longer appropriate to try to continue to play games at this time. We will continue to monitor all the appropriate medical advice, and we will encourage our players and other members of the NHL community to take all reasonable precautions, including self-quarantine where appropriate. Our goal is to resume play as soon as it is appropriate and prudent so that we will be able to complete the season and award the Stanley Cup. Until then, we thank NHL fans for your patience and hope you stay healthy. And Darren Dreger reported that all travel, team meetings, practices have been prohibited until further notice. The message to players and staff is to go home and stay home until told otherwise. The Players Association agrees this was the only appropriate course of action and will work alongside the NHL as well as medical consultants throughout the process.
Connor McDavid released a statement saying, quote, public health and safety are a priority at a time like this. As players, we support the NHL and NHLPA's decision to suspend this season for the safety of the teams and their fans. We look forward to the day we can get back playing the game we love in front of full arenas.
We knew it was coming, and it was the right thing to do. Nobody is disputing that. Unprecedented extremes call for unprecedented measures. Thursday, though, there were 10 games on tap, postseason push, and just like that, no more. Necessary, but it's still strange. With more from where the Leafs were supposed to take on the Predators, here is Gord Miller and Ray Ferraro.
It's an odd thing, you know, the cameras are being packed up, the mics are being put away, the production trucks are pulling out, and for who knows how long. And, you know, Ray, on a personal level, you know, when you wake up this morning and you're not sure whether you're broadcasting a game tonight or under what circumstance you're going to do it, it was a strange day.
Really strange, and you know, for those of us who've built their lives around and livelihood around the game, and for the players, it's one thing at the end of the year, you know, the season's over, you close it up, you pack it up, and we'll see in September when training camps open. The unknown is so vast here, and what I find really remarkable is how quickly it happened. And last night, following along, it seemed every time I refreshed my phone, there was more news.
Right.
And none of it was particularly good.
It's worth noting that the NHL does have some experience, unfortunately, dealing with something like this. If you recall, 5 years ago in the 2014-2015 season, the mumps went through the NHL.
Right.
Basically 5 teams: Minnesota, Anaheim, St. Louis, Pittsburgh. Sidney Crosby was one of those who contracted the mumps.
Right.
It was about 25 players, and it underscores that as much as you want to empty the building and limit exposure to large numbers of people, that in a contact sport, there's not much you can do.
There's not for that. With the Utah basketball player Rudy Gobert, the trail of how quickly this can be spread, and what the players and the leagues worry about are, you know, Gobert was in Boston on Friday, Tampa Bay was there Saturday, they were in Detroit Sunday, they were here Tuesday. I'm standing 3 feet away from them on Tuesday night. Right. And so there's all these people in the building as well. It's all stuff to think about and to be vigilant about, and you can have the best plan, but until you have to put the plan in order, I mean, how do you really know? And so what the league has done, you know, as soon as Gobert tested positive, I think it was pretty clear that the dominoes were going to go fast.
There are, you can see here the immediate implications, guys, of what's happening. The people that work in the arena, you know, concessions, security, people that work in the suites, our technicians who get, you know, or freelancers who get paid by the game are all being sent home and won't be working again for some time. That's obviously a small slice of the economic pie that's going on here in terms of the effect of airlines, hotels, restaurants, businesses. But you can already see it here that there are people that are going home today that aren't going to work for a while.
Well, when we walked into the building, I mean, we come in sometimes and there's not much going on before morning skate, yet there's always a buzz of activity, and there's nothing going on here right now. And I thought it was pretty remarkable that Mark Cuban came out and spoke about what they're trying to initiate in Dallas with the employees, just like that you talked about, Gord, of people that are directly connected to the games that will no longer be there. This is it's unprecedented for sure. It's multi-layered and multifaceted, and really it comes down to the best thing we all can do is look after yourself so you can help look after somebody else.
Exactly. By the way, I was in Halifax last night for the U Sports hockey dinner last night, the Final 8 hockey tournament slated to happen at Acadia University this weekend. Still waiting to hear if that's going ahead. But Darren Dreger made the point early in the broadcast that this isn't just the NHL. There's all kinds of tournaments that are scheduled to go on at all kinds of levels in all kinds of sports, and all kinds of events in people's lives that are scheduled to go on that are on hold for now.
And some critical dates for the NHL with the season now on hold. Here's a look at some of them. The 2020 playoffs were scheduled to start on Wednesday, April the 8th. The latest start date for the Stanley Cup was Saturday, June 13th. The draft itself was set for the 26th and 27th of June. And as always, the start of free agency was set for July the 1st.
Following in the NHL's footsteps, the CHL and AHL also decided to suspend their seasons until further notice. AHL announcing they'd contact season ticket holders at a later date with more details.
Hockey Canada has released a statement in response to COVID-19, canceling all Hockey Canada sanctioned activities effective Friday, March the 13th.
Yeah, and as you might expect, the list of world sporting events affected by COVID-19 continues to grow. How Major League Baseball is dealing with the virus. Next.
Major League Baseball has announced it's delayed the start of the regular season by at least 2 weeks. It has canceled all remaining spring training games as of 4 p.m. Eastern on Thursday. The Blue Jays were one of 10 Grapefruit League teams that did play their spring training games early Thursday afternoon before the league announced its decision following a conference call with all 30 clubs. Major League Baseball is also working on contingency plans for scheduling moving forward. All right, for more, here's our MLB insider, Steve Phillips, with Rod Smith.
We're 2 weeks away from what was supposed to be opening day, and then another 2 weeks delaying the season. So it's about 4 weeks away. And effectively what this will do, it will undo all the things the players were preparing for the season. So clubs have asked players to stay around the spring training sites, to be around the medical care and the training staff that are there to try to help them stay in shape. But they have no ability to commit the player to do it. The players can go back home if they want. They're asking players to stay around, but the player can do what he wants to do, trying to stay in shape. But for as much time as players take off, they're going to have to be prepared when they come back.
I was going to say, I mean, I'm sure you could look at it and say, well, it's still a month away from opening day now with a 2-week extension. But to your point, you do have to factor in the amount of time that players need when they get back together again, if they're away from their teams for a couple of weeks. How much preparation do they need, just even in terms of days, in order to be ready to play regular season baseball again?
Yeah, I think the best case scenario, right? We're going to start the season in 4 weeks. I think that the pitchers are the key. It's not the position players. The position players can go out there a week to 10 days, get their swings right, get their legs right, go out and play. It's the pitchers who had just gotten stretched out to about 5 innings. Now they're going to lose some of that stamina they built up. They're going to have to come back. So I think you're probably looking at 3 weeks for pitching staff to get prepared. 2 on the short side. So maybe 2 weeks from now they say, you know what, April 8th, April 9th looks good. Let's get back into spring training, getting our guys ready again and prepare for the season. I do suspect, though, we'll have expanded rosters when the seasons begin. We saw that back in '95 in the strike-shortened season where they started the season a little bit late to give them some extra pitchers on the roster so you didn't have to wait for everybody to get stretched out to be 7 innings, 100 pitches or so. So I think you're looking at least 3 weeks for the teams and the players to get back in camp and the pitchers to get ready.
How many games realistically does Major League Baseball have to play in order to justify going on to playoffs and making it a season?
Yeah, a couple things, right? The 2-week delay, I think Major League Baseball is looking at it saying, if it's only a 2-week delay to the season, we can get in 162 games. They'll push it back. They may eat up some travel days. They'll be able to sort of get the full season in. Beyond that, I think you're going to have a shortened season. And so I don't think there's a magic number. I think that whatever it's going to take, whenever they can come back and play, they'll call it a season. Now, I guess, listen, you get too deep into it, then maybe not. But I think you can go deep into the season, call it a season, even if it's a shorter period of time, and ultimately crown a World Series champion sometime in probably November.
Right. So possibly, if it took that long, and I know they're thinking and hoping it could be earlier, but even if they started in July, you still think they could get something done?
I do. I think that if it gives them half a season, quote unquote half a season, they'll do it. They'll take it.
The cascade of pro sports leagues being shut down in North America can be pinpointed somewhat directly to Wednesday night, when it was revealed that the Utah Jazz's Rudy Gobert had tested positive for the coronavirus. That set everything into motion. Now, a second Jazz player has tested positive for COVID-19, Donovan Mitchell. There were a total of 58 tests administered on Wednesday night to Jazz players and personnel, with the remaining tests coming back negative. Players the Jazz faced within the past 10 days, which includes the Toronto Raptors, have been told to self-quarantine. After testing positive for the coronavirus Wednesday, Gobert posted this on Instagram, writing, "I want to thank everyone for the outpouring of concern and support over the last 24 hours. I've gone through so many emotions since learning of my diagnosis, mostly fear, anxiety, and embarrassment. The first and most important thing is I'd like to publicly apologize to the people that I may have endangered. At the time, I had no idea I was even infected. I was careless and make no excuse. I hope my story serves as a warning and causes everyone to take this seriously. I'll do whatever I can to support using my experience as a way to educate others and prevent the spread of this virus. I am under great care and will fully recover. Thank you again for all your support. I encourage everyone to take all the steps to stay safe and healthy. Love." Let's go more on Gobert with Gino Reda, Dave Feschuk, and Bruce Arthur.
It sounds like Rudy Gobert of the Utah Jazz was an idiot, right? Like, not only that video, which is going to live forever, by the way, of him touching every tape recorder, making a mockery of what the leagues tried to do to limit their players' exposure, moving the media back 6 feet. He was supporting the media when he did that, apparently. And touching the materials of other players in the Utah Jazz locker room. And that's why Donovan Mitchell, apparently, one of the reasons.
He was not happy. He said he was reckless and careless in what he was doing.
Yes. So Rudy Gobert acted like an idiot. I was on the phone just now with a high-ranking sports executive, and he said, Rudy Gobert saved America. And think about that for a second. Up until Wednesday night, think about what happened right before the team doctor for the Utah Jazz sprinted onto the floor. They were going to play a game with 20,000 people in the building. The night before, the Toronto Maple Leafs played a game here with 19,000 people in the building. If Rudy Gobert does not test positive for the coronavirus, Donovan Mitchell plays with it.
The game.
And they are playing NHL and NBA games tonight with fans in the stands. Major League Baseball spring training games go on right now. And there is no shock to the system that leads to Broadway canceling performances for a month. To almost every sports league suspending or pausing its operations. This is the first national shock.
Why was that so important? Why was it so important that it was Rudy Gobert? We had heard about Tom Hanks. I don't think we were going to have this reaction that Tom Hanks and his wife tested positive. Why was it such a turning point, such an enormous turning point when an athlete of his ilk was tested positive?
Because of what it precipitated. I mean, when you've got this speaks to politicians, it speaks to the everyman. When you've got a billion-dollar sports league, a multi-billion-dollar operation like the NBA shutting down operations, that tells you this is real, folks. Yeah. This isn't theory. This isn't what might happen. This is happening.
All of us right now are focused on the fact that we've lost sports right now. There's going to be no sports on television tonight to speak of. Even golf is shutting down. Like, that's the World Curling Championship, I think, is the last stone standing. The fact that sports is doing this is the first time, I think, on a national and North American basis that people are going to realize this is an emergency. This is a public health emergency. And so Rudy Gobert, however he contracted it, the fact that he had unwise, goofy behavior, that he didn't take this seriously, and he got it and shut down North American professional sports. That, in an era where a lot of our leaders are being deeply irresponsible with how they are handling this, is really important.
So as Dan mentioned, players from teams that the Jazz have played within the past 10 days were told to self-quarantine. Those teams, the Cavaliers, New York Knicks, Celtics, Pistons, and most recently the Toronto Raptors, the two playing just on Monday, and Rudy Gobert being on the floor for 32 minutes. Well, the Raptors releasing this following statement earlier Thursday. Out of an abundance of caution, members of the Toronto Raptors traveling party have been tested for the virus. We await those results. Our players, coaches, and traveling staff have all been advised to go into self-isolation for 14 days, which means minimizing contact in accordance with public health guidelines. Our team doctors remain in communication with infection control specialists and public health authorities, and we will continue to abide by their advice.
NBA Commissioner Adam Silver was a guest of Inside the NBA Thursday. The league has announced they will be on hiatus for the next 30 days. Silver on the possibility of the season being canceled.
Of course it's possible. I just don't know more at this point. I mean, there's another factor that may go to the seasonality of this virus. Again, I've talked to a lot of experts. It's a little clear. Some have a theory that it's just as with the common flu, as the weather changes, we may see it begin to peter out a little bit. I mean, again, we don't know. So, at this point, we're just waiting. One of the things we want to do during this hiatus, and this is one of the things, I had a meeting with our general managers and team presidents late this afternoon by conference call to talk about how are we going to use this time, decisions as to whether the players will stay in market. Understandably, some of the players may play in a market, but their families may live in another city. Will they be rejoining their families? What's the best way to keep them safe? What's the best way to keep them in shape? All those things are still on the table because this has happened so quickly.
NBA players reacted on Twitter Thursday to news of the season being suspended. Giannis Antetokounmpo wrote, "Basketball becomes secondary. Take care of yourselves and your family. Wash your hands off it." Pacers center Miles Turner. Shout out to all the medical workers and hospital employees out there.
All right, meanwhile, March Madness has officially been called off as well. The NCAA has canceled all of its men's and women's basketball tournaments, as well as all remaining winter and spring NCAA championships.
That shot of empty seats.
Absolutely. All right, with the sports world on hold, it was business as usual for the PGA at the Players' Championship, but that'll change late Thursday night.
The PGA Tour has announced the cancellation of this week's Players' Championship, as well as all other tournaments over the next 4 weeks through the Valero Texas Open, which was scheduled for the first week of April. The opening round of the Players actually took place on Thursday with fans in attendance. The tour initially planned for the remaining rounds and upcoming events to be played without fans on the grounds, but that all changed late Thursday. And joined now by our TSN golf analyst, Bob Weeks, who is at the tournament. Bob, how quickly did things go from playing with a gallery to playing in front of no fans to the tournament being canceled completely?
Yeah, I mean, go back even on Tuesday, they had a big Chainsmokers concert here on the 17th hole with about 3,000 or 4,000 people. It really kind of went out of control, and the optics, I think, were a big part of what happened. The tour got some clearances from the local health officials here that said there was no risk, really, or low risk of anyone contacting or contracting the coronavirus. And then on noon on Thursday, they decided they would go ahead for the last 3 rounds with nobody there, and then all of a sudden at 9:45 tonight, the players received a text saying the tournament's been canceled. I think there was a lot of pressure from the players internally on Commissioner Jay Monahan to make this move, and also the LPGA came out and said they were going to postpone 3 tournaments, including one of their major championships. So I think all those things combined left the PGA Tour kind of on an island, and I think they finally made the right decision.
All right, Bob, what does this mean for the Masters next month?
Yeah, that's the big question. That's actually the next tournament on the schedule, and the Masters, of course, is independently run, so it doesn't come under the confines of the PGA Tour. A couple of sources I talked to on Thursday told me that the tournament is going to go ahead. They're not quite sure yet exactly what that means in terms of fans. There was one part saying that perhaps they would have a limited fan access. Another one said there would be no fan access. They would go out there and just the players and the caddies, and that would be very strange because Augusta National National, more than any other golf course, is really known for the cheers. You can tell what's going on in that tournament on that golf course by where the cheers come from. The roars on Sunday tell you exactly what's happening if you're anywhere on the property. So to have basically silence going out there for 4 rounds of the Masters would be a very, very strange major championship.
Absolutely. It's something that you can't, that energy, duplicate or simulate. Bob, thank you so much for this.
Thanks.
And what started the ball rolling there was when big name players started questioning, saying, why the heck are we playing?
Yeah, I mean, Phil Mickelson, one of those saying, I don't want to pass it on to anyone. I also don't want to contract it as well. The coronavirus has also impacted play on the pitch. How soccer federations are reacting to the outbreak. We've got that next. The MLS also announcing on Thursday that effective immediately, their season would be suspended for at least 30 days as it continues to assess the impact of COVID-19. Now, prior to the suspension, 2 matches had already been postponed as measures taken to contain COVID-19. In conversation with Rod Smith, here's Christian Jack with the feedback he's hearing about the decision.
General reaction, as I said, is of relief, I think. Obviously, this is unprecedented for everybody. The league were pretty adamant the moment that the NBA suspended their season last night that they felt that this is something that they wanted to do themselves. They had the meetings this morning with their own executives and ownership groups. Obviously, there was no objection to that matter. By that point, some players, even in Canada, Toronto FC players had gathered to train. Montreal Impact had started their training session, speaking to a couple of players as well. It felt surreal to them at that point. They felt that the inevitable was coming, and then there was a sense of relief, a player told me, a sense of relief once it all came down because they felt that this was something that needed to happen. Look, at the end of the day, these guys are performers, and there was that scenario of them playing this weekend in games like in Europe right now where there aren't any fans, and the players and executives within MLS that I spoke to was that was something they absolutely did not want to go down. So they're not doing that, and they have suspended the season for 30 days. And as of right now, it is all the unknown, as we know, but I'm told Major League Soccer still has plans and still believe that they can try and get in the full 34-game schedule and playoffs, and whether that takes us past the proposed November 8th MLS Cup date is something to be seen after.
Right, and I want to follow up, and you mentioned Europe, and of course, Euro 2020. It is to kick off June 12th, and the tournament is to take place in 12 different European countries, and it's supposed to open in Rome. What are the possibilities now, the way things are playing out, that there won't be a European Championship?
Well, Rod, here's the facts. I'll give you my opinion in a second. The facts are that UEFA have called an emergency video conference call meeting on Tuesday with all representatives of all 55 members, representatives of all 55 members of UEFA to not only discuss the possibility of moving Euro 2020 to Euro 2021, to maybe making sure that the tournament moves at the end of this season, or even just pushing the European football season back a little bit and cancelling the European Championships for a year. UEFA scheduled a meeting for Tuesday to bide themselves some time to talk to all these members before that, and we can expect a major announcement on Tuesday the 17th.
The Premier League released a statement Thursday regarding the coronavirus, originally saying all EPL matches would go ahead as scheduled this weekend with supporters in attendance. Shortly after that statement, Arsenal manager Mikel Arteta tested positive for COVID-19, and then later on Thursday, Chelsea's Callum Hudson-Odoi also tested positive. Both Arsenal and Chelsea have closed their training facilities, and club staff and players who had recent contact with the two will now self-isolate. The Premier League will hold an emergency club meeting Friday to discuss future fixtures. So that's an ongoing situation. And not to be an alarmist, but you know what Friday is?
No.
It's Friday the 13th.
Well, thank you, Dan, for ruining that. But yeah, I mean, I don't know why, when it comes to making these decisions, you don't just listen to the best possible advice. I mean, I know you want to prolong and give fans what they want, but really what they need is safety first and foremost. Okay, coming up, examining the impact of the coronavirus from a medical perspective. We've got details coming up next.
The Women's World Curling Championship has been canceled in response to the coronavirus. The event was set to begin Saturday in Prince George, BC. Organizers said earlier this week that they believe the tournament could still go on as planned. The World Curling Federation is still evaluating the status of the Men's World Championships in Scotland.
All right, the XFL put out a statement saying currently the XFL will not be playing its regular season games. However, all players will be paid their base pay and benefits for the 2020 regular season. All XFL ticket holders will be issued refunds or credit towards future games. The XFL is committed to playing a full season in 2021 and future years. The league previously announced that Sunday's game between the Seattle Dragons and the LA Wildcats will be played as scheduled, but without fans present in the stadium.
You know who we need to hear from? An actual doctor. Yeah, a doctor. That is what we need. Gino is with a doctor.
Alongside senior correspondent Rick Westhead and Dr. Andrew Morris, infectious diseases physician with Sinai Health. And doctor, this is what you do on a daily basis. You've been doing this now for 2 decades, keeping track of infectious diseases and how we as society should respond to it. When you hear the leagues like the NHL and the NBA say, we're merely putting the play on a pause, what's your reaction to that?
Well, I think they can put it on a pause for a while, but it's not going to be just 2 weeks. I think it's pretty unrealistic to think that we're going to be able to restart these leagues over the next few weeks, because players are going to continue to be at risk of having infections, and until this goes away in the community, it won't go away in sports at all.
Knowing how the U.S. has bungled the testing for COVID-19, how much would it help Canadians and safeguard Canada if our country actually closed down the border, the U.S.-Canada border right now?
Well, I think from a health perspective, that's probably the right thing to do. I think from an economic, a social perspective, that's more of a challenge. But we know that in Canada, a lot of our new COVID infections have been acquired outside the country, almost all of them. And so as much as we can do to mitigate infections coming into the country, the better off we'll be, at least in the short term.
What's it like inside the hospital right now? The doctors, nurses preparing for this crisis that everyone can see coming?
It's a busy time. I think I'm really fortunate. I've got amazing colleagues who are taking on a variety of leadership roles, keeping everyone calm. I think we've got a calm, quiet resolve, but most of us are confident we're going to be able to deal with this.
And in terms of return to play, what is the data that you're going to be looking for before you'd be comfortable telling these teams and leagues, yes, you can start getting your players ready to go back on the courts and ice and fields?
Yeah, well, I think once we see that community spread has largely abated, that's probably going to be around the time that it'd be reasonable for these sports leagues to start up again.
We've been hearing a lot about tests and numbers. How many Canadians watching this right now are going to know someone who dies because of the coronavirus?
Hard to know, but I think most Canadians, if they don't know one person at the end of this who will have died from it, they'll at least know somebody who knows somebody who will have died from this.
You've put a recommendation towards the federal government earlier today, yourself and your colleagues. Tell us what that recommendation is.
Well, we've urged the government to at least advise Canadians not to travel outside the country. Really doesn't matter which country. We're pretty confident that there's widespread infection globally right now. That's why the WHO has classified it as a pandemic. And our goal is to keep Canadians safe, keep our healthcare system pretty stable, and what that requires is, as much as possible, limiting the travel.
Doctor, thank you for joining us, and we appreciate it, and good luck in your efforts to shut this down.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
We've been joined in studio by Dr. Andrew Morris, infectious disease physician of Sinai Health.
Okay. We admit this show's been pretty much doom and gloom, but we have good news.
Really good news. Okay, so a team of researchers from Sunnybrook, McMaster University and University of Toronto have isolated severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus. That's the agent responsible for the ongoing outbreak of COVID-19. Canadians, doing big work.
Oh, that's like winning the Stanley Cup.
It's an amazing start for the steps to find, hopefully, a cure for this. And the auto racing world also made some adjustments due to the coronavirus. We've got those details coming up next.
Get guess what? NASCAR will continue to go ahead with their next two events, the Folds of Honor Quick Trip 500 from Atlanta and the Dixie Vodka 400 from Miami, without fans in attendance. The events will be restricted to competitors, crews, officials, and other necessary personnel. In a statement, NASCAR said they are working with public health officials to determine future scheduling beyond these events.
Meantime, F1 announced that they will cancel the Australian Grand Prix this weekend. McLaren Racing announced their intention to withdraw from the race after a member of their team tested positive for coronavirus. 7 other tests came back negative. 1 other person has been tested for the virus, but that individual didn't have any access to any Formula One team or any associated suppliers.
And despite all the league cancellations across the sports world, IOC President Thomas Bach says they're committed to delivering safe Olympic Games in July. Bach spoke at the Olympic flame lighting ceremony in ancient Olympia. It was held without the public on hand due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The IOC president insists that athletes should continue with preparations for the Games that get underway in Tokyo July 24th. So here's the sheer number of developments in the sporting world Thursday in response to COVID-19. You have the NHL, Major League Baseball, NCAA March Madness canceled, Major League Soccer. The ATP suspended play for 6 weeks. The CFL canceled the Combine. American Hockey League, we said that. They suspended their season. The CHL suspended its season as well. UFC Fight Night, which is scheduled for April 11th, that's been moved from Portland to Las Vegas.
It has been a day when it comes to Thursday. That was a day.
Yeah, it's been a crazy couple days. So maybe for the weekend, put the phone down, put social media down, because the news is not going to really change at this point. And if you go to the grocery store, remember there's other humans that might need food too. Don't.
Right?
Leave some for others.
Right. I think
be a good neighbor.
When we're all practicing social distance when we can, we can also use this time to really self-reflect. Yes, we use sports as our distraction. Yes, we use sports as our escape from the real world. But guess what? At the end of the day, we're still in the real world.
Yes.
Still interacting with people. All I'm trying to say is a little consideration for your neighbors.
And get out in nature. Walk in the woods.
That was a good talk there, Dan.
I know.
It was a rough week.
It was.
Let's try it again next week.
Hey, shows still will go on. We'll be back here Sunday.
30 days, at least 30 days with no basketball at least, maybe NHL, soccer. Lots to fill.
Oh, and we can do it. Have a great weekend.